Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And our guest this month is Bethany Bennett. Hello.
Here.
We're so happy to have you here. We
Thank you
read
for
this
having me.
delightful thing, Good Duke Gone Wild. And you even signed this one for me. Very exciting. And so yeah, we're just so excited to have you. We love the book and we're excited to talk
Yeah,
about it.
I'm really glad you liked it. Because there's always that little bit of a risk where you're invited to go and talk to someone and they're like, so let me tell you why I thought this sucked.
I
Well,
really hope people don't do
really
that in
good
real life.
stuff.
That's terrible.
There's risk. It's like the upgraded version of tagging someone in a bad review.
Ugh,
I'm
which is
gonna
also
read you the
horrible.
review live on camera and record it.
Never.
No, I
Um,
don't think you guys would ever do that, but
no,
oh my
no,
No, that
gosh,
would
there's
be
always that
bold
risk.
though. Look you in your eyeball and tell you.
yes, be like, P.S., you're the worst. Um, so I am so curious, starting off. Your heroine is an erotic novel writer. And so I was curious about your research with that as far as that historical time period and those novels and like how that all kind of came together. And also just like, or were secret pen names always a thing, or was anybody just like they didn't care and they just like said who they were?
I think a lot of times, especially when you're talking about like racy material,
Yeah,
there a lot of books were written by anonymous,
right.
or
Okay.
they did have a pen name. Um, some people, because there was a certain level of notoriety, obviously, that would
Yeah.
go with it. And so having a pen name, not a stretch at all as far as historical accuracy goes.
Yeah.
And this was set in right before the end, like right at the end of the war, of the Napoleonic Wars. And so it wasn't until about 10 years after this when you actually started seeing legislation happening in Great Britain that controlled the public distribution and sale of spicy material.
Mm.
And so some people are like, oh, they were illegal during this time. They weren't, actually. They weren't. Obviously, yes, if you were going to have a selling it on the shelves of a bookstore, you want to have a bookstore that is open-minded, you know. But those absolutely 100% existed. And so, as far as her being an erotic novelist and having it sold in stores, that actually is historically accurate. You didn't end up with legislation for another like 10 years. And then it was a few more years after that that they actually started like really, really nailing things down because it's basically just, a bunch of old white guys in parliament that were trying to figure out how to solve the world's ills through
Weird.
separating the
Sounds super
masses
familiar.
and
Through
themselves.
celibacy.
We're just gonna fix anything. We're just gonna make it illegal for you to exist.
Yeah,
It's so funny. Yeah,
sounds great.
it's familiar. It's really familiar.
Yeah, it is.
I also had kind of a adjacent, I guess, question, which was about your experience as a bookseller. I've heard you talk about that being in your colorful backstory, but I was curious on how that reflected in this book. Like I would have flagged that there was like a network with the booksellers. And also there were some moments where you kind of got to see a little bit like the operations behind the scenes, but I was curious how much you intentionally put in, how much you had to leave out.
Um, some of my experiences might leak into the revisions of Constance's book,
Mm,
just because some of my really wild bookseller stories I think might be a little bit more appropriate for where she's at in her story in her life, because she's her book takes place 2 years after this one. And so in the epilogue of this one, it has been 2 years since they got married. And they're getting ready to go to London. And because she's going to go and, you know, she's hugely pregnant. And I as a rule, I'm not someone that needs to have a baby in an epilogue. And it kind of annoys me. But because the whole begetting an heir thing was part of his motivation storyline, I felt like
Yeah.
that needed to be addressed. And so, so that's not you don't need a baby be happy. That's not how it works. But for their storyline, I thought that it was important. And so Constance's book actually picks up when they get to London.
so fun.
And so yeah, so that is I think that with hers, where she's by the time her book starts, she's a little bit notorious for ditching her wedding and all of that. And so you have a little bit more of like the male attention that's not necessarily the right kind of male attention, you know? And that sort of tracks with a lot of my experiences as a bookseller because I moved into a very small town where literally like the cows outnumbered the people. And um and it's like not even a stretch of the imagination to say that. It's like very much so the cows outnumbered the people. Everyone was related to everyone else. Half of them didn't have their teeth. It was like, and so I walked in and I was 28, 29, and a single mom, and I wasn't related to anyone, and I
Right.
had all of my teeth. And it was like something out of one of those stories where, you know, the new person comes to town and suddenly there's bows swarming everywhere. I gave them all like, you know, the seven dwarves like type nicknames because I couldn't keep them straight. And people, and I was just like, and the shenanigans of like
It
it just
sounds like a rom-com movie.
it felt like fresh meat that was just thrown into a pit of lions, you know? And yeah, so I think that there are some of those experiences that I will probably end up in
That's
the
coming up.
revisions of
Yeah.
Constance's book. Um, but so much of it is you hear people's stories. They talk to you like you're a bartender, you know? And there's always like the classics that people joke about that actually happen. Like I saw this book and it's blue and it was over there, but it was on a special display. So I know that's not actually where it lives. It was just over there. And it was like 2 months ago. Sure, let's do a tour of all the blue books and like 30,000 titles that are in this store. You know? And so yeah, stuff like that. I think they're kind of like those sorts of moments that people kind of joke about, but they really do happen. They really do.
Did you ever con someone into buying a signed copy?
Oh my gosh.
Because somebody else.
I didn't con someone in, I accidentally sold a signed copy. It was it was this old like box of used cookbooks. And some of them were really old and some of them were just like ratty and some of them were just, you know, it was the compilation from the middle schoolers of this church of whatever, you know. And one of them was this kind of cool looking one that was the best recipes of the senators' wives of that time period, right? For the US senators' wives. And I was like, just like get it out of the box, basically. It was like, here, like $5, just take it. And so I sold it for $5. And as I was ringing it up, I opened it up, and on the inside of it, it was signed by Lady Brit Johnson.
Oh my God. Oopsie daisy.
You're like, actually, there's
Correct.
zeros.
You're like, well, it's your lucky day.
I already gave you the price. And I feel like
Oh
that would just
my
be,
gosh.
you know, to go back on that would be horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, what you said sort of answered one of my next questions, which was about just the series in general, hoping that it is a series, wondering who is coming next and what you're working on. So I love Connie and I'm very excited to see her. So
Connie's book is I had a lot of fun writing it, honestly.
okay.
She kind of like made me laugh out loud several times because she's just kind of a character. But she's also Connie is the first ADHD heroine that I've ever written. But of course, at this point, they wouldn't know what ADHD was. And so, being someone who I deal with ADHD day in day out, you know, and so being able to write a heroine that the way that she thinks and the way that she feels is so tied in with her actual natural brain chemistry that is unaltered. You know, she doesn't have medication as an option. She doesn't have any kind of diagnosis that would explain things as an option. And so a lot of her personal journey is actually starting to like combat those lies that you hear, especially as a woman with ADHD. You know, those things like, oh, you're flighty, or you just need to try harder, and you know, you just need to just commit to something and just follow through with it. How is that so hard? You know, like the problem is you instead of that all gets conflated. And so a lot of her personal journey is dealing with stuff like that. So yeah, she was a ton of fun to write. I can't wait for her. She's supposed to be, last I heard anyway, that book will be coming out this next August.
Okay. Yeah, Megan and I had a little, not a debate, but we were like trying to figure out like what are the chances? Like, who's
Like, who's
next?
gonna be next? Yeah. Well, and we could make a case for, like, either one of them being next, so we were
Yeah.
wondering, like, which way you were gonna go, so that's fun. Did you
Um,
have a hard time deciding that, or did you just know that Connie was ready?
I knew that Connie was ready,
Okay.
and I knew that Hattie will absolutely have to be backed into a corner in order to, like, she's not moving. She's stubborn and
Mhm.
she has her reasons. You know, she has her reasons for being like, you
Mhm.
peace out on this whole like lifetime of marriage thing. No, 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 I'm good.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I knew that Hattie would have absolutely have to be backed into a corner and, and not thrilled
Last
with the
one standing.
situation. Last one standing, yes.
Okay.
So yeah, so Connie is next.
Awesome.
I also wanted to ask you about the friendships in the book. You actually had quite a few of like non-romantic relationships, right? Between Dorian and Oliver, between all the cousins, like the relationships that they have to each other. And then also um with the like friendships with Jared and Leo, like both between Dorian and Caro, like they both kind of forge relationships um outside of their own, you know, with those two.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I was curious, like why you decided to have so many friendships in there, and then like kind of how you felt that that worked with the romance. Because this story, you know, has some layers as far as the things that each of the characters are dealing with.
Mhm.
Um, so I was curious if you had all of those other relationships because it was needed, or like in a particular way, like if you envisioned that it was needed in a particular way for the romance to be able to happen, or if you had other reasons.
Well, I am not a succinct person, whether in speaking or writing, and so when you're pushing your absolute limits of your word limit with your publisher, any additional anyone has to be justified. So initially, I had these friendships and everything on the page for the purpose of just showing that no one here is lonely and desperate. You know, that I think that there is kind of a a thing that happens where we have a tendency to maybe write a character that is just they've kind of holed away. And I mean, granted, in some of those stories that it completely totally makes sense. But I feel like sometimes the lens is so narrow on just these two people that it makes it kind of seem like they're existing in a vacuum and none of the rest of the world, you know, they don't have a life outside of this other special person. And so I really wanted to show that these are two people that have networks, they have support, they have people that they care about, and that this other romantic relationship coming in on top of all of that is really just like it's the cherry on top of the sundae, you know, like their life is already sweet. But that's just like the rounding it out. And so I don't necessarily enjoy books where it's like this person is like the whole "oh, you complete me" thing is like I like the idea of uh, consenting adults that are already complete, that are already like, yeah, they may have some stuff to handle and they have some stuff to figure out, but at the end of the day, I think that there was a lot of power in Caro's speech, you know, during that black moment when Caro's giving her speech and she's basically like, I love you, but I don't need a hero anymore. You know? And honestly, like if the book had ended there, it would have just been historical women's fiction. You know, because she would have been fine.
Right.
She would have
Yeah.
grieved the loss, she would have grieved the relationship, and then she would have been fine. She has people, she has relationships, she has support, she has like, you know, and I don't necessarily, I mean, yeah, the drama for our books is always fun, but I think like if you actually try to really imagine these scenarios in real life, the idea of being with someone because you literally cannot exist with them, like financially, socially, whatever. Like you just cannot exist with them. I just feel like it's really horribly unhealthy. So that was when so that was initially why all those side characters and side relationships were on the page. Um, and then it was finding a way to make them vital to the story, to make them
Mhm.
actually like impact the story directly, and kind of weaving those in to justify the extra work count.
I mean, I thought they were all super fun, and I do, even though like currently in romance, and maybe even like for the past 5 to 10 years, there's been like a narrowing in to that, to the relationship. I think I've heard Sarah McLean talk about them being like two people in a phone booth, and just kind of very narrowed in on the relationship. And those can be really fun to read, but obviously it's nice to also read a book where there is community of different sorts.
Yeah.
And I person on a personal level, I do find the idea of two people who have choices choosing each other to be much more like romantic than the idea of like I can't I can't live unless you're in my life, and so I have no choice. um
Right.
Even though that does sound a lot more dramatic, I guess.
Yes, it sounds a lot more dramatic, but that was one of the things that kind of came up frequently when I was still dating was it's like, I don't need you, I'm choosing you.
Hmm.
And so I feel like that was kind of a theme that sort of carried into this one, whether I realized it or not. It was something that was, she doesn't need him, but she's choosing him,
Yeah.
even though it means facing a lot of her insecurities and exposing herself in a lot of ways and being
Yeah.
vulnerable in a lot of ways. So,
I was also like just between the people. Like we were first reading, I initially thought that Patty and Constance were sisters, and then it was like, wait a minute, no, they're all cousins. So
cousins.
I'm really curious. I mean, it wasn't like a big part of but I am now very curious how they all ended up under that one roof. And it's making me like, what's going on with this aunt and uncle that like everybody
The
that
everybody,
everybody's landing on
yeah,
their doorstep.
Everyone needs a safe place to go. And if you're lucky enough to have that safe place be a family member, you know, then
yeah.
you're very, very lucky indeed. But I think everyone needs a safe place to go. And the aunt and uncle at Martin House are very much they're the safe place.
It seemed
They're the
like they're the
family
safe
safe.
place for their extended for all the extended
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. For the extended family as well. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, Hattie's book. Hopefully I will get to write Hattie's book. I'm contracted to write this one and Constance's book. And with the caveat being, hey, make sure that there are characters, side characters that people will care about so we can, do another one. So I have Hattie's book it's so loud in my head and I know what happens with her and I know what her backstory is, but Hattie grew up in Scotland. Her So basically, the uncle is his two sisters were the ones that went and got married. So one married the vicar, who, as we know, is a pile, and that's Caro's mom and dad. And then the other sister went and married a Scotsman and went to Scotland, and that is Hattie's parents. And so they are, yeah, they are very much the safe place. But so like I have her story in my head, and I'm really hoping that I will be able to write it and publish it through Forever. um, the goal, of course, is if for some reason, because historical romance as a genre right now is super weird and rocky in the marketplace, um, and that's like a whole tangent. But if for some reason my publisher is like, oh, let's do something else, then I will. My hope is that I will get them to sign off on me going ahead and just like indie pubbing it because I think that Hattie's story is going to be really important too.
Yeah.
She's an assault survivor. Is she has her reasons for choosing the bear.
Yeah. I mean, I
And
think you can tell even in this book that
yeah,
she's lived through some things and she's not interested in
yep,
continuing
yeah.
that.
And I think that there's a lot of healing that can happen for, so many women have experiences that align with that, and the idea of being able to see on the page a healing process that makes sense, and it's not just like magical peen, like
Right.
you find the one and all of your issues go away. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And
No.
especially during a time period when therapists were not a thing,
Right.
you know. I think that it's a little bit of a challenge to write it, but it also is going to take a very special kind of hero to it's going to be able to make her feel safe and make her feel heard. And so I'm man, I hope I get to play with those two because they're just
Oh, yes, definitely.
yeah.
We'll be keeping our fingers crossed for that. And of course,
Mhm.
getting the word out as much as we can.
Cross your fingers.
Oh, yes, definitely. So, when you started this series, um, was it any different for you than it was the first time around with your first three books? Or was it very much the same? Can you talk a little bit about like your process and how that kind of works for you?
The first books were I had no idea if it was going to be a series. I had no idea if it was going to be, like, really, I wrote Any Rogue Will Do thinking that this was a standalone. And then Cal kept stealing the page. He just kept like desperately running into the scene and taking over. And I was like, okay, dude, you're going to need your own book. So obviously, this is at least a duet. And then I had one page towards the back where Malachi is on the page. And I was like, oh, crap, dude, you're a hero too. And I don't know who you are, but like, you're really fun. And so I was like, okay, we have a trilogy. And so really bumbled and stumbled my way through that one. Huge learning curve, I think, anytime you're starting a new project. And that
Yeah.
was very much part of the learning curve for me. This one, I knew that at the core, the stories were about the cousins
Mhm.
and were about the way that they are um, they are making a safe place for each other and they are making a sisterhood for each other. Um, and so I knew coming into this one that it was really going to be about the three women and as they like grow and change and build their lives from this like tiny little nest. And I love the fact that they are working class. And so you don't have the restrictions of like all eyes on you, like in the aristocratic circles.
Mhm.
You have these women would already know about sex
Right.
because statistically 40% of the working class women that got married during that time they were already pregnant, and frankly they were kind of lucky to be having their partner marry them because a lot of them were having to make their money on their back. It
Yeah.
was part of survival you know
Yeah.
um, the fact that all three women sleep in one bed, and they share one room and it's tight quarters. There are no maids or servants or butlers or anything. These are women that they know how to cook and they know how to clean and they remake their gowns over and over in order to make themselves have, something pretty but useful. And you're wearing the same gown over and over. I mean, like, it's a very different world than so much of the aristocratic circles that we usually will read and write in. And I
Yeah.
thought that was just super fun because they had a freedom, but they also had, I mean, they had a lot of dangers, but they also had a lot of freedoms
Yeah.
that these other heroines I've written didn't have.
That's really fun, and I'm glad that you got to do that. I feel like we often like hear that in historical that like being in those like kind of, I don't know, like fantasy world of like everyone's rich and aristocratic and close to the
Everything's
prince or
happening in a
whatever.
ballroom. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like the place to be. So it is really nice to read a book where not everyone is in that sphere. And in this one, you did get the opportunity to, because you have a duke and someone who is working class kind of coming together, you get to kind of explore the differences.
Mhm.
I thought it was really fun when Caroline points out like, hey, like these people know every single thing that's happening in your house. Also, if you think they don't have an opinion about it, like
You're wrong.
maybe men.
You're wrong.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
and also just how like the fact that he respects her and values her opinion means that later he has internalized that information and uses it. I I laughed out loud, I think, when he like talked to the
Same.
footman, and his mom's like, "Do you know that man?
Do you
Like,
know
what's
him?
what is
No.
happening?"
That was great. I love because he
Yeah,
was just so like, so which one of these you think? And the guy's like, I mean, neither. That one. He's like, oh, okay, yeah. Like it was a whole like conversation, and his mom was so like flummoxed, and it was
like
hilarious.
why are you talking to that person? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was great.
Yes. Yeah.
Not
The silver
central to
dragon.
the action, but really fun to like be able to have those little nuggets that are a little bit different. I mean, I think technically if you're talking like all aristocrats and people who are like very comfy in their world, they wouldn't have acknowledged the servants at all. And so then you get like this weird situation where you have like people doing things for you, but they're like invisible. And that's their job, is to be like,
That's their
you know,
job, was to be
meld into the
invisible.
walls.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that was like servant etiquette, was you're invisible. Get the job done without actually being there. Like
Mhm.
you're invisible. And so, yeah, so but I don't know, I found myself continually going back and forth to be like, there are other people in the room. And for him to start aligning himself with someone that was working class, and that meant that he was suddenly aware of how many people were around him. And it wasn't just the watching eyes that he was already kind of nervous about. It was like, oh my gosh, there's so many more. But they also, these are thinking and feeling people that have opinions and that know things that I don't know. And so I think that there's this kind of like humbling thing that anyone that has that much power and that much money could use a little bit of humbling.
Well, and a bit of a difference too, in that like before they're either there like for his pleasure or they're his responsibility, right? Because the other end of the spectrum, I guess, is him as Duke being responsible for the duchy. So he's got to make sure that all these tenants and anyone who's, you know, like dependent on him has what they need. So it's they're either his responsibility or they're there to like be
Make his life
silent and
easy.
serve.
Yeah.
But even then,
It's
like when they're the responsibility, they're on the same list along with all the cattle and the sheep and the pigs.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
So there's never a time
they're
where they're like
they're not people.
people with an opinion and who might be able to like, you know, round out his knowledge of what's happening in the room. But it was interesting to see that snippet, I guess. And then also just because then later when he was trying to find information, and there were times where like his influence didn't really help anything. And it was interesting to see the dynamic between the two, because they were kind of on they respected each other, they saw each other as equals, but then they came from such a different like perspective that automatic I mean, I think it's not automatic, but it was necessary for them to like influence each other's way of seeing the world, and that was really fun to see.
Yeah. Oh,
um
so good.
I think, Megan, didn't you have, I think when we talked before, you had a question about Dorian's panic attacks.
Yeah, I was a little curious about that as far as like his history of having them, because I guess in that moment with the letter, he's clearly been through this before. Like he knows his breathing techniques, he knows like what he's supposed to do. It's not like shocking to him. And so I was curious if there was ever a point where that was like delved into a little more and it ended up cut out, or like how you came to the point where you decided like this was already a thing that he was dealing with and this wasn't like the first time that he was having one.
I am very much I am a pantser. And what I usually, my usual thing that I say is like, I know where I'm going, but I don't know how I'm getting there. And so his reaction to the letter initially was this like absolute, just like heart pounding panic. He can't breathe, you know? And so honestly, I was as surprised as you were, but, but I also realized that as pivotal as his relationship with his first wife was for him in his life, I didn't want that letter to be his first panic attack. I didn't want that to have that much power for him. And so I thought about it and said, okay, well, other points in his life when he's experienced this. And then I realized that having, again, you're in a time period where mental health is not really a thing. Therapists don't exist. Psychology is not even, on the radar at this point. And so to have a man who has this kind of like, he has a panic disorder, but he doesn't have a name for it. It's kind of like Constance with her ADHD, right? He's different. His brain works a little differently. He handles things a little differently, but he doesn't have a reason why, and he doesn't have a name for it. There's no diagnoses. There's no feeling of community with others that are like you. Um, and then you get to put that person with this, like, where it feels like a secret. It feels like like a dirty little secret that, like, it's not quite right, right? And that's how he would interpret it. And then to put him into a situation where, like, he's serving the king in diplomatic circles, and it's during the war, and he's doing, some things that are like officially sanctioned and some things that are officially sanctioned but still need to get done. I mean, to take someone that has a panic disorder, an anxiety disorder, and then put them in those situations, I think that it just sort of adds an extra layer to him as a character. And it does also shows his strength too, that he has managed to accomplish all of these things while having this seed of self-doubt about himself. Um, and he's learned through trial and error how to manage it.
Yeah.
And so I think that it adds a layer of strength to him as a character. It adds a layer of complexity to him as a character. But yeah, I was writing that scene and he had a panic attack, and I was like, well then, okay, look at you. All right, let's
I think the other of one other historical that like is strongly comes to mind when I think about heroes who have, like an issue that is difficult to manage, but that, they got to do it, is one Dance with the Duke from Tessa Dare. That hero is like the Duke. He only shows up at midnight, and people are like, oh, and he's so mysterious and he's so snobby, but really he also has panic attacks, and he has like I think social anxiety. Well, he does not like peace in a crowd. He does not do well, so he does show up at midnight, do one dance, go to the supper belt, and then we're out.
yeah.
um but you don't find out until way into the book that's the thing.
Mhm.
That's that he's not mysterious. In fact, he's
He's just doing his
trying.
best to cope.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really interesting because in that book, like, obviously that hero is like, okay, I'm going to structure my life so I don't have to deal with this because it's a problem. And your hero, I guess, doesn't have like, once he is asked to go and have this job on the continent, like, he can't truly say no to it, but he does seem to face like, he's not telling his mom he can't go to the ball, or that he can't. He just has to figure out how he's gonna manage and still face situations that might trigger, that reaction. So that was fun to read too. I mean, not fun, but it
Yeah.
was nice to see it like approached a different way than what I've seen before.
Right. I guess I'll ask you what we ask everyone, which is, what is your favorite trope to read?
Um, right now I'm really into Runaway Brides and Marriage of Convenience. Those are ones I still am just enjoying. I always said, I was like, I want to write a Runaway Bride book. And then we get Connie's book and I was like, okay, yes. So check mark. Um, but I love reading Runaway Bride and Marriage of Convenience. I think it's because so much of it is going to be an internal struggle and the reasons for them doing that. Um, it's a very, like, emotional standpoint. It's not necessarily like physical opportunity, like there's only one bed, or you've just spent forever with this person, like brother's best friend or whatever, and oh, I'm invisible, like I love the idea of you've just done this massive change. And usually it's in a situation where the character has a little bit more agency over their actions. And so I think it's just as fun to watch people make deliberate choices and then write out the consequences of their actions as it is to watch them like fumble and bumble their way into a corner and then be like, oh crap, and here we are. So there's positive and negatives for any, but those are my two right now that I'm loving.
Awesome.
What I usually ask is if we were a fly on the wall when you're in the middle of your writing process, what would we see?
Chaos. Um, Thankfully, it's these days, I don't necessarily have to juggle household stuff and all of that while I'm on deadline. Um, my husband has had to learn how to be a really good partner in that way. And so with the first couple of books, I was fresh out of surgery. I only had one working arm. I was like and I was like changing diapers with my feet with my toddler, like while trying to write a book. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Oh my
And
gosh.
these days it's significantly better.
You're
We
like, this is
are,
easy now.
now it's just I got my second round of edits for this book. I had 9 days. I had 9 days to do it. And my editor was like, I'm so sorry. I know that this is like completely, I got the email with the feedback on my birthday. And she was like, I'm so sorry. This is the shortest deadline we have, but can't do anything about it. Like it's a solid deadline. You got to do it. And and at the time, like in the email, she was like, I don't even have notes for you, like an editorial letter. So use the notes that I left in the document and do your best. Like, and so when you are slammed with that kind of circumstance, you're like, okay, this is outside of my hands, but I still got to do my job. I texted my husband. I was like, edits just came back. I have 9 days, and he's like, all right, all you got to do is write. And so it's like took care of everything else. So, which is brilliant if you have a partner like that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's my office or I'll take my laptop to bed with me at night. Sometimes I'll have a tendency to do like a mental second wind when everyone's asleep and it's quiet and then the characters start talking. And so I'll bring my laptop to bed with me, or I will just sit here and I do like spurts of writing, and then I'll go and get up and do something else, and then I'll come back and do a spurt. And so it's a little chaotic. Like there's cups littered everywhere. There's
Gotta have our beverages.
if I didn't have a partner who was literally taking care of everything and waiting on me hand and foot basically during that time, by the end of it I would have like a stack of dishes and dirty silverware, and it would just be like
Oh, no.
this like little cave of
But now
cave
all
of
I'm
chaos.
picturing you is you waking up with like a laptop glued to your face.
Like someone asked me during an interview a few weeks ago, and they said like, when you finish a book, what do you do to celebrate? And I was like, I sleep. Like I just pass
Starfish
out.
in the
I'm
bed.
done.
Like, we're done.
Like you heave a big breath and then you just conk out, And then I go buy a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Nice. I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bethany. This has been so much fun. We
yeah.
really love this book. Everybody, go listen to our recaps, or if you've already read it, and if you haven't, go buy it because it's so much fun. And
Yeah.
we can't wait for Connie.
Thank you so much, ladies. I really appreciate it. And I'm really glad you loved it because this book was an adventure to write, honestly.
It was so much
So
fun.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Bye.